I have to admit this video was fairly frustrating to make. In fact, I had to redo it, and I made a video for Black Belt Secrets because I got too opinionated, so I put that video on Black Belt Secrets, so please go and check that out in the description below. Please do subscribe there too. I'd love to hit 200,000 subscribers over there, and you get what I really think about what's going on in these scenarios. Now, in this one, it's no different. It's quite frustrating, but I do want to do a video on this channel just to set out the framework and obviously to point you over towards secrets. Now, this video may lead you to believe that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have no clue how to grow the economy. And I say that because it's reported that they are asking regulators, and I'll go into more detail about why that's such a bad idea in my secrets video, in my humble view. But why that is such a bad idea to ask regulators to come up with ideas for growth. Now, we had reports that the economy had shrunk to zero growth between July and September, according to revised figures, despite Labour promising to deliver the highest sustained economic growth, etc. It's now reported that there's a letter from Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, and whoever else signed the letter, including the Financial Conduct Authority, the Competition and Markets Authority, Energy and Water Regulators, Ofgem and Ofwat, and Sky also said that the Financial Reporting Council, Media Regulator, Ofcom, Environment Agency and Healthcare Regulators also received the letter. The BBC also reported on this to say that it is understood that this letter has been sent to these agencies asking for ideas for growth, and that ministers said that collaboration is essential to ensure that the regulatory environment became pro-growth and pro-investment, whilst respecting the independence of regulators. Now, again, I get a little bit more opinionated in my secrets video. I'll link that below. But suffice to say that the setup of regulators is obviously there to regulate those industries. It is essentially to ensure that businesses, companies are doing things safely, lawfully, and complying with the regulations that are either set by legislation or they're set by statutory instruments, or in many instances the regulators themselves set rules and regulations that they have the power to do underneath overarching legislation. Now, that all might sound confusing, but let's break this down. We have primary legislation. For example, the Equality Act, the Financial Services and Markets Act of 2000, and the function and the framework and the principles of this legislation are all set so that each of these regulators can safely and properly regulate various markets, businesses have rules to comply with, and so on. For example, the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 sets out duties and responsibilities for workplace safety and everything else. Secondary legislation, for example, statutory instruments, that is where it's not a primary piece of legislation, but it is an individual piece of legislation that is set underneath other overarching legislation or underneath section rules, which provides regulations, orders made by governments, etc., that these companies then have to comply with. The function of those is to provide detailed rules and guidance that those companies then need to abide by, and that the regulators regulate for that industry. Now, a good classic example would be the Road Traffic Act 1988 as an overarching piece of legislation, which then has a whole host of statutory instruments which set various regulations such as speed limits, seatbelt requirements, vehicle safety requirements, standards, regulations, and so on. And then, of course, you have the overarching regulatory bodies that set all of those rules, administer and make sure companies adhere to those rules, and so on. Now, there's an inherent conflict of interest here for the government to ask these regulators to make sure that they are pro-growth, pro-investment, and make sure that they are working and coming up with ideas for these sort of things. And now, the reason for that is it is not their job to be looking for ways to grow. It is their job to ensure that these regulations are adhered to. But nonetheless, this letter has apparently asked all of these regulators to come up with proposals by mid-January. Now, the BBC says, and I quote, "This letter is evidence that Sir Keir wants to pull every possible governmental lever to make sure arm's-length bodies like regulators, as well as government departments, prioritise helping deliver Labour's mission of achieving the highest sustained growth in the G7. Now, there's a contradiction in terms there. These bodies are arm's length for a reason. And it's a little bit like that with our regulator, the Bar Standards Board, which is separate from the Bar Council, which is the general representative body for barristers of England and Wales. It wasn't always so. It was a combined entity at one point, but it was separated. The Bar Standards Board was separated for that very reason, so that it is a separate regulatory body at arm's length from the representative body for barristers at the Bar of England and Wales, and therefore the Bar Standards Board was seen to be and to operate very much more independently. But that's why it is a contradiction in terms here, to say that they want to work with and collaborate with regulators to ensure that they are more pro-growth and pro-investment according to Labour's manifesto and Labour's goals and aims, would inherently mean there is a conflict of interest there. You'll find my opinions on that in my Black Belt Secrets video linked below, so do go and watch that as well. But whilst thinking about this video, I also remembered that not too long ago we had Humza Yousaf talking about increasing regulations, so I'll just nip over and play you this very short snippet here. This was about increasing regulations. This was to do with X.
And in terms of regulation, let me say this is something that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will now have to think seriously about what more needs to be done. We need to have better regulation to ensure that we don't have the kind of disinformation that has run rampant in the last week.
And I'm sure Humza Yousaf is not the only one that has called for more regulation. And of course, more regulation may hinder growth, and obviously fewer regulations will be pro-growth. So surely that is a conflict of interest. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you think that is a conflict of interest for Labour to be pressing regulators to come up with ideas to increase growth, because that can surely only really be to relax some of those regulations. And we've seen a hint of that with regard to housing and the discussions with housing with Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer about building houses on the grey belts, as they're calling it, and saying that they will push these through where local authorities are objecting to those plans. And so again, that comes fisticuffs with regulation. So let me know what you think about that. But it is fair to say that the economy has crashed somewhat after this recent budget, and now this, at least on the face of it, appears to show that they don't know how to fix the economy and grow the economy. But let me know what you think in the comments below. But as I said, I got a little bit into this video before I decided to do a fuller version on Black Belt Secrets, so do check that out below. And as always, thank you for watching.